JavaScript has strong object-oriented programming capabilities. Although there have been some debates about the differences in their capabilities compared to other languages, object-oriented programming is a programming paradigm that uses abstraction to create models based on the real world. It uses diverse techniques of previously established paradigms, including modularity, polymorphism, and encapsulation. But nowadays, many programming languages such as Java, JavaScript, C, C++, Python, PHP, Ruby, and Objective-C support object-oriented programming, OOP. But object-oriented programming can be considered as software design through a set of cooperating objects, unlike a traditional point of view in which a program can be considered as a set of functions, or simply as a list of instructions for the computer. But in object-oriented programming, each object is capable of receiving messages, processing data, and sending messages to other objects. Each object can be seen as a small independent machine with a defined role or responsibility. And OOP aims to promote greater flexibility and ease of maintenance in programming, and is very popular in large-scale software engineering. So thanks to its strong emphasis on modularity, the object-oriented code is designed to be easier to develop and easier to understand later, lending itself to a more direct analysis to a greater codification and understanding of complex situations and procedures that other methods of less modular programming. A class only defines the characteristic of the object. A method only defines how the method is executed. Now for the abstraction, the conjunction of complex inheritance, methods, and properties that an object must be able to simulate in a model of reality. Then polymorphism. Different classes could define the same methods or property, but for a more extensive description of object-oriented programming, see object-oriented programming in Wikipedia. Now, the prototype-based programming is a style of object-oriented programming in which classes are not present and behavior reuse, known as inheritance in class-based languages, and that is carried out through a process of declaration of existing objects that serve as prototypes. And this model is also known as classless programming, but prototype or based on examples. But the original and more canonical example of a language based on prototypes is the programming language self-developed by David Unger and Randall Smith. However, the style of programming without classes has become increasingly popular and has been adopted for programming languages such as JavaScript, Cecil, Newton scripts, Elo, MOO, Rebol, Kivo, Squeak when using the viewer framework to manipulate the morphic components, and several others. Then namespace. A namespace is a container that allows you to associate all the functionality of a certain object with a unique name. But in JavaScript, a namespace is an object that allows method, properties, and objects to be associated. And the idea of creating namespace in JavaScript is simple. Creating a single global object for variables, methods, functions by converting them into properties of that object. And the use of namespace allows minimizing the naming conflict with other objects, making them unique within our application. A namespace is an object, and we're going to create a global object called myApplication. So as you can see, you need to do these to create the application, to create a namespace. But note, to continue with the best practices, we will use uppercases for the namespace. We'll use the global object myApplication that exists, and if this doesn't exist, we create an empty object called myApplication that will encapsulate methods, functions, variables, and other objects that we will create. And we can also create sub-namespaces. As you can see, sub-namespace, then myApplication.event. But here's the code for the creation of a namespace and how to add variables, functions, and methods, as you can see on the screen. Now for the basic objects. JavaScript has several objects included in its core, such as math, object, array, and string. But the following example shows how to use the math object to obtain a random number by using its random method alert. Note, this and all other examples assume that a function called alert, like the one included in a web browser, is defined globally, and the alert function is not really part of JavaScript. Now for the class. JavaScript is a language based on prototypes that doesn't contain any class declaration. as it is, for example, C++ or Java. And this is sometimes confusing for programmers accustomed to languages with a class declaration. Instead, JavaScript uses functions as classes. Defining a class is as easy as defining a function. And the following example defines a new class called person, so the function person. To create a new example of an object, obj, we use the declaration of new obj, assigning the result, which is of type obj, to a variable to be assessed later. In the following example, a class called person is defined, and we create two extensions, person1 and person2. Now for the builder. The constructor is called at the moment of the creation of the instance, the moment in which the instance of the object is created. And the constructor is a method of the class. In JavaScript, the function serves as the constructor of the object. Therefore, there is no need to explicitly define a constructor method, and each action declared in the class is executed at the time of creation of the instance. And the constructor is used to set the properties of the object or to call the methods to prepare the object for its use. So the property, or the object attribute, well, the properties are variables contained in the class, and each instance of the object has those properties. The properties must be set to the prototype property of the class, which is the function, so that the inheritance works correctly. And to work with properties within the class, the reserved word this is used, which refers to the current object. Then the access, the read or write, to a property from outside the class is done with the syntax instance number.property. But it is the same syntax used by C++, Java, and some other languages. From within the class, the syntax is this, point property that is used to obtain or set the value of the property. Now the methods. The methods follow the same logic as the properties. The difference is that they are functions and they are defined as functions. Calling a method is similar to assessing a property, but adding an open and close parenthesis to the end of the method name, possibly with arguments. Now heritage. Inheritance is a way to create a class as a specialized version of one or more classes. JavaScript only allows simple inheritance, and this specialized class is commonly called a daughter or secondary, and the other class is called a parent or a primary. And in JavaScript, inheritance is achieved by assigning an instance of the primary class to the secondary class, and then specializing. Then abstraction, a mechanism that allows modeling the current part of the work problem, and this can be achieved by inheritance, specialization, or by composition. And JavaScript achieves specialization by inheritance and composition by allowing class instances to be the values of the attributes or of other objects. The JavaScript function class inherits from the object class, and this demonstrates the specialization of the model, and the function point prototype property is an object example, because this demonstrates decomposition.